is what I wish to speak of in this video. What is the difference? We associate a spell with perhaps something that is put upon us, and a feeling of helplessness prevails. We're unwittingly driven to behave in a specific way. The words entrancement and enchantment come into play. We feel lost, hopelessly drawn to do a specific thing, like fall in love, being beholden to someone in some way, becoming their slave even, perhaps. Spells are really a lot to do with human behaviour. When we talk about a curse, then we're talking about something that we really cannot shake off, and something that is quite painful, quite uncomfortable. We're also talking about an affliction, something we're trying to hide from, something trying to get us, something we have to take cover from, something that pulls us apart so we feel we're broken. Perhaps even it's an illness, maybe a mysterious illness. Perhaps coronavirus comes to mind in this instance. Also, perhaps it's something to do with terrible anxiety or terrible grief, or feeling that you're being hammered down and you really don't know who you are anymore. And what is interesting is that a lot of people today will write to me and say, I'm under psychic attack. And that is the same way as saying I am cursed, except we're not always likely to use that word today. But in earlier times, you were either under a spell, either good or bad. If you were cursed, then there was nothing good about a curse. We were affected by these things for thousands of years, and now, are we still affected today? And if you have ever tried to break a curse that is unbreakable, you will know the kind of curse I am talking about. You will need to work very hard if you want to do anything about it, because for the rest of eternity you may just find yourself shrugging at everything and saying, never mind. Then the spell also decreed that people would end up forgetting their own voices, so that when they spoke, strange sounds would come out of their mouths, harsh and grating, shouting all across the world, making all the trees and animals and wise ones stop their ears, and they would no longer recognize their own faces, so that when they looked at themselves, they would not know who they were anymore. It may come as a surprise to many that spells have been used for many thousands of years in many different cultures. It's only today when we say the word spell in terms of casting a spell that we tend to associate it with something either of witchcraft or something weird and wacky. But for a long time, we saw it as something that was rather concrete in its existence. When we say we are spelling a word, and when we say we are casting a spell, it really comes from the same root. A long time ago, spells used to be written down. That was part of the nature of writing in the beginning. We made marks. You've seen the cut marks on stones, perhaps, on standing stones. They're a form of a spell and a form of a written language. You scratched marks into stone, you did patterns, you did signs, you did symbols. You only have to look at something like the runes to see the symbols that are scratched into stones, and in much earlier times the Roman Egyptians used to carve tarot symbols into blocks of wood. I think it's proof that the Romans were pretty good at dishing out curses and actually writing it down. I curse so and so. It was in their graffiti, I believe. It's a really good education if you can take much of this on board. In casting a spell, we are trying to envelop the power of the elements. Now, what we've got to remember is that the power of the elements is far more powerful than humans are, and that's why we try to employ the elements: fire, water, air, earth. And I think probably in many pagan circles they still apply these magical elements so that they can merge them together, use their qualities and make something work. Well, that was always so for a long, 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 long time. We have to look at the fact, first and foremost, that we are not as powerful as the energies, as the elements, as the entities, even if we're calling upon spirits, that we are calling in or employing to act on our behalf when we're asking for something to happen. So we've got to remember this. And before that, we've got to remember to be respectful. If we are calling upon air, earth, fire, water, any kind of animal form, any kind of bird form, just about anything at all, we've got to be mega respectful so that we show that we are not taking this for granted. We are not assuming a power that we do not actually have. We live in this narcissistic age where we are accustomed to believing that self-righteousness is the norm, that we have a natural power of the self, human divinity, which is another quarrel I have in terms of the idea that a human is not divine, especially if you compare us to the elements, air, earth, fire and water, and you compare us to the earth. Now, humility is a very, very important tool to use if you are making any kind of spell, or if you're doing anything at all, offering a prayer, it doesn't matter what it is. We must demonstrate humility, and that is because we are at the bottom of the ladder of all the creatures on earth. And my great-grandfather used to say this, and boy, was he correct. we assume power, and once we get to use power, we just go with it. We just run with it. And other creatures on the earth, elements, whatever you like to look at, what the earth is composed of, nothing runs with power more than we do. We run with it globally. We even run with it universally. Oh, soon humans will take over Mars. We are arrogant enough to say. What is wrong with us? Why do we have to run with this power all the time? We've got to continuously take a step back and back and back, so that we align ourselves with how we used to think and how we used to be a long time ago. That puts us in touch with our ancestors, and that's what we've got to do if we want to think about making spells. Way back in the Neolithic Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, there was an awful lot of conflict going on when farming came in, when people were vying for power over land, claiming land, making it their own when it was never theirs to take in the first place. So we lost that humility, we lost that vital connection with the ancestral idea of relating to folklore and to myth, and generally to the way a human being should behave. So we really needed to find religion at that early stage. We really needed to give ourselves to something that was going to make us take that step back, and that's really what religion did. Meant, of course, that ritual spellcasting became prayer and meditation and dwelling on things in a very, very different way. As horrible as a curse may be, the awareness of its existence, well, what it can do is make us aware of a negativity. When we're being attacked or changed or altered in some way, if we dismiss a curse as poppycock, are we also dismissing our ability to sense something bad when it's in our midst, thereby disconnecting ourselves from the material balance of good and bad, or the spiritual balance of right and wrong, perhaps we're dismissing what is wholly bad and wholly good. Perhaps we're denying ourselves something that we used to be able to sense and used to be able to perceive, and therefore get into perspective and either avoid or entertain. Like it or not, we have the essence of spells and curses embedded in our makeup, in our psychology, in our very souls. We used to consider these things important, not because we liked being attacked, but because we had an awareness of right and wrong and good and bad. That was part of the rich makeup of what we were, what our ancestors were. We are otherwise bland, empty, flavourless beings. Perhaps you might say beings without a story.